got a couple of questions for you here at the Ask Me Anything to come from the audience, and I know they're chewing at the bit to ask them, so let's jump straight in with the first question.
So to start off with, who are you and what is your question?
I'm Stephen, and I'm from the National Blood Authority in Canberra, working for the government. I'm wondering, is it possible to have Razor markup and other Razor elements mixed in with an Angular app?
Is it possible to have Razor markup mixed in with Angular? I think that in the days of Angular 1, that was not only possible, but a very smart and reasonable thing to do. But when you get into Angular 2, I think I would strongly question that that's a very good thing to do. Certainly the Angular 2 team are interested in being able to put in all sorts of performance optimizations, like pre-compiling your views. They're obviously not going to be able to do that if you're effectively dynamically generating them. You would not also be able to pre-build your views in that way. So it's certainly not something that I've seen anyone try to do, and it's not something that I'm probably going to be trying to create technology for, because I think there might be too many drawbacks. But if you come up with some really good scenarios why you need it, then I guess we would find some ways of doing it.
Quick. Where do you see the Angular CLI going, and how do you see what you've shown us in your talk competing with the Angular CLI?
Well, I don't really expect to compete with the Angular CLI. Whatever things it does well, you will be able to use, because the applications that we're creating are regular Angular 2 applications, and they'll be compatible with the same sort of build mechanisms. I should think that a lot of people will use the Angular CLI through some sort of tool that's going to drive it, like whether it's Gulp or Webpack or something else, or they'll be driving Gulp or Webpack through Angular CLI, whichever way they want to organize things. And so whatever kind of patterns become popular, we will be looking to support, basically.
That's great.
How would that look right now? Would someone have a CLI application and then pull down those NuGet packages you mentioned in your talk and then integrate those? Is that the process?
Do you mean in terms of creating the new project in the first place?
Or let's say they've got an existing CLI, or they're just about to kick off with the Angular CLI, and they want to leverage these NuGet packages. What would it look like?
Okay, well, that they are even considering these NuGet packages would imply that they're using ASP.NET Core. So in that case, they're not going to be able to get a complete structured project just directly out of the Angular CLI. They're going to have to either use one of the project templates that I've been talking about today, or they're going to have to do a new project using the .NET tools, and then look at using the Angular CLI to bring some Angular stuff into it. Okay. As for exactly how that's going to look, I don't know, because it's not mature enough to say either way just now. Okay. But we're going to have to adapt really to whatever comes along.
Cool. It looks very exciting. I think we have another question here.
Yeah.
I've got 3 questions, if that's okay. The first one is, so currently our application, we've got to run .NET Run, Webpack Dev Server, and a Karma Watch. Are you guys planning on including a test runner as part of the SPA services as well?
Yeah, good question. So far, we have not got any sort of test stuff in there, just because there are so many concepts already to deal with, and there are so many different ways that you can do testing, none of which are as much of a de facto standard as, say, you've got for building with Webpack, that it's a bit of a hazard, really, to push people down one particular path. That said, there have been a lot of requests for it, and I don't think we're going to be able to avoid this forever. So, yes, I expect we will need to do this, but I don't personally have very strong feelings about which set of technologies we want. So, if you want to give us a pull request on that, then, yeah, we could definitely look at something like Karma, but I mean, there's so many different libraries that you can combine with that. It depends a lot on people's application needs.
Yeah. The second question was, you showed the node services and you pulled in a package.
Yes.
What's the deployment story? Like, how would you deploy that? So you do like a .NET publish, but obviously you're including a file that requires an npm module.
It's so when you do an npm install, normally if you pass the save flag to npm install, then it's going to add that as a dependency to your package.json. And then when it comes to publish and deploy time, you are going to get that package through whatever other mechanism you use to get NPM packages. Now, maybe you don't have any mechanism for that, you're going to have to create one, but let's say that you deploy to Azure using Kudu. Well, that automatically already will install it at deploy time, so you have to do nothing. It's just going to show up as part of the deployment process. Whereas if you use Visual Studio to do the publishing, then it will not automatically do that. So you'll need to make sure that it includes that file that you've already got on disk at that point. Yeah.
Last question was, do you have any opinions on the current web frameworks? Do you have any preferences? I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but...
I'm not particularly shy about expressing preference. Personally, I really, really like what React has been doing. I love how much innovation they've brought. They've come up with some totally different ways of approaching web application development, and it's spawned such a lot of new concepts. The fact that they've been able to push it into things like React Native and other stuff is really impressive. So although I've never personally used it on a large project, I really like the way it feels. That said, Angular 2 is obviously a very good fit for a lot of projects. There are tons of people using Knockout, and that can be used in some really modern ways as well. People say they like Aurelia a lot. I don't personally have any experience of that, but I'm not going to disagree with people who say they like it. So I'm sure that there's tons of good stuff, but I particularly have a soft spot for React.
Okay. Thanks.
So I have a question based on that, Stephen. Inside of Microsoft, are they using all of these frameworks? Is there a tendency to lean towards one or the other? Are they even using Angular 2 or React for some projects?
Yeah, well, Microsoft is such a massive company with so many different teams doing different things that you will find teams doing everything. I've certainly encountered teams that are using Angular, that are using Ember, that are using Knockout, and dozens of teams that invent their own thing because, hey, we're Microsoft and we're going to do that, whether you like it or not. So, yeah, Microsoft collectively is using everything, and it's not a top-down directed organization. Satya does not tell us that we're supposed to use a particular JavaScript framework or something like that. So you do find teams using everything.
Okay. So I have trouble just keeping up with Angular 2, and I saw your slide. So you obviously kind of keep loosely on top of at least what you showed 4 different things.
Yeah.
Doesn't your brain explode?
If I also had the responsibility of shipping an application that was making money and having customers phone me and say it was broken and stuff, that would probably be overwhelming. But since my job is largely to know about these frameworks and to deliver stuff based on them, it's not completely unreasonable to know about a few of them.
Okay, cool. I got lots of questions for you because I'm kind of a fan, but. Also, I think you were involved with the new Azure portal, is that right?
Yeah,
that was your previous...
Yeah, I worked on that for 2 years.
Okay. And I heard someone say that there was the number of lines of TypeScript in there, but I can't remember the exact number. Was it...
Yeah, I certainly don't know the exact number, but it is a massive project.
Someone said, I think it was someone was saying the million number or more.
Oh, yeah, easily, yeah. Certainly way beyond that. I would be surprised if there was a bigger TypeScript project out there. I know there are some other really big TypeScript ones, but this is crazy massive. There are certainly, I don't know. I can't even say how many developers there are, but it's so many different teams. It's dozens of teams all contributing code into that. It's huge.
So around that TypeScript sort of thing, what would it have been like if you didn't use it?
Well, I can tell you with some precision because the previous version of the Azure portal was built on a comparable scale and it didn't use TypeScript, it was JavaScript. And I also had the privilege, if you can call it that, of kind of being a consumer of those APIs because I was working previously on one of the platforms that exposed an API, exposed a UI through the previous Azure portal. It was a rough experience, to be completely honest with you, because you never really knew whether any code that you wrote was going to still work a month from now. There was no automated way of particularly verifying it. Obviously, we wrote automated tests, but you just can't cover everything. Particularly when it's some minor variation in an API's usage that's changed. It's tough. That said, there were benefits. It was cool that we didn't have to compile anything, and that in terms of debugging, you just see the original code, and you don't have to think about anything else. But these days, TypeScript compilation is fast. It wasn't in the past. It used to be hard, but these days it is pretty fast and it's reliable. It doesn't cause your machine to run out of memory like it used to. And things like source maps are supported everywhere now.
Yep.
So it's a good experience now, and I can't imagine someone building something like the Azure portal without those kind of benefits these days.
Yeah. Okay. So another question for .NET developers, because obviously this is your space and you do a lot of these front-end frameworks. What would you say is a heads up all the hard stuff for a .NET developer moving from maybe doing a little Angular 1 and a lot of back-end towards this more bigger front-end sort of space? Do you have any advice for them, or what will be hard for them, or what should they watch out for?
I guess probably the hardest thing about doing modern large-scale single-page application development today is just that there's no right way to do it. And every single team in the world that does this creates their own unique technology stack and their own set of patterns around it. And you just can't particularly translate one set of opinions about how stuff works from one team to another. So there's always this massive learning curve. There's always this unknown about whether the stuff you're doing is going to turn out to have been a good idea a year or two from now. And we don't really have a great solution to that. It's a very immature part of the industry, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, unfortunately. So I think trying to stay simple, trying not to invent too much crazy stuff on your own, because you will get then locked to some technology that becomes obsoleted within a year or something like that. Just try and stick to de facto standard technologies. It's kind of about the best consolation I can offer for that.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much for joining us, and thanks for a great talk at NDC.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, it's me, Scott Hanselman, here with Adam Kogan at NDC Sydney. We're hanging out. It's SSW Video. How are you, sir? That's how you do an intro. No, go ahead. I'll be right here, please.